New York was wide awake even at dawn. The sound of footsteps, rushing taxis, and the constant hum of the city filled the air with restless energy. In that endless stream of motion stood a young woman named Elara. Her coffee steamed against the cold air, and a soft breeze tossed her dark hair across her face. She seemed to smile, but her eyes carried a question the city could not answer. In a crowd of millions, she still felt invisible. Something in her heart whispered, "Will anyone ever truly see me?" That question, unspoken yet heavy, followed her as she walked toward the old library on the corner of Fifth Avenue. The library was a world apart from the city outside. Dusty sunlight filtered through tall windows, painting the room in quiet gold. The air smelled of paper and memory. Elara stepped between the shelves, her fingers brushing spines of forgotten books. At the far end of the hall sat a young man. His name was Kael. He leaned over a heavy history volume, glasses slipping down his nose, his expression lost in thought. When Elara entered, he looked up. For the briefest moment, silence tightened between them, as though fate itself had paused to take notice. Kael's lips curved into a half-smile, the kind that carried warmth without effort. Their first conversation was simple, but it lit a spark neither expected. "Kael, are you looking for a book, or did you just lose your way here?" "Elara, softly, I was searching for a book, but maybe I ended up in the wrong aisle." The words were light, almost careless, but their eyes spoke louder. Something familiar lingered in the way they looked at one another, an invisible thread tugging at their hearts. They did not yet know it, but this was the very first note of a melody that would play across their entire lives. Days passed, and their paths began to cross again and again. Chance encounters soon turned into meetings neither of them wished to miss. They sat together in quiet corners of cafes, where laughter mixed with the smell of roasted coffee beans. They walked through Central Park, speaking of dreams, fears, and the strange beauty of the city around them. Kael told her about his parents, who had come to America with little more than hope, and the lessons of resilience they left him. Elara spoke of her childhood in a wealthy house that had everything but affection. Slowly, gently, they began to fit together, two incomplete stories finding their missing chapters in each other.
And then came the night on the Brooklyn Bridge. The city stretched out like a crown of lights, the water below shimmering with reflection.
Elara leaned against the railing, her hair lifted by the cool wind. Her voice trembled as she asked, "Kael, have you ever thought about what would happen if we lost each other?" Kael reached for her hand, steady and certain. "No," he whispered. "Because I promise you, I will never let that happen." Under the glow of the skyline, with the hum of the city around them, they sealed their first unspoken vow. Their story had only just begun. The days that followed were painted in laughter and discovery. Elara and Kael became inseparable in ways neither could explain. Mornings found them sharing quiet conversations in coffee shops, afternoons brought long walks beneath the fading autumn leaves, and evenings often ended with phone calls that stretched into the early hours. With Kael, Elara felt a comfort she had never known. His words were steady, his presence grounding. With Elara, Kael felt alive in a way he had always imagined but never experienced. They weren't just falling in love, they were building a rhythm, a melody that carried through each ordinary moment of their lives. But love, even in its sweetest bloom, is never free from shadows. Small arguments began to slip between their joy, tiny misunderstandings that seemed trivial, yet felt heavy because they mattered to each other. One evening at a quiet diner, Elara teased Kael for forgetting a promise to meet earlier, her laughter masking a hint of hurt. Kael frowned, frustrated not at her but at himself, for letting her down. "I'm sorry," he said softly, "sometimes I lose track of time, but I never lose sight of you." Elara's eyes softened, but a trace of silence lingered between them. They were learning that love was not only laughter and promises, it was also patience and forgiveness. As autumn turned to winter, their bond deepened. Snow fell across the city, blanketing the streets in white, and the two of them carved memories into the season. They built snowmen in the park, shared scarves when the wind grew too harsh, and whispered secrets beneath the twinkling lights of the Christmas markets. Yet even within these moments of magic, Elara sometimes pulled away, afraid of how much she needed him. She had spent years teaching herself to be strong and distant, but Kael's presence broke through those walls. "You don't always have to be strong," Kael told her one evening, brushing snow from her hair. "With me you can just be." For the first time, Elara allowed herself to believe it. Still, love tested them in quiet ways. There were nights when Kael's long hours of work left Elara waiting alone, her heart whispering old fears of being forgotten. There were mornings when Elara's silence left Kael wondering if she would ever fully let him in. Yet, in every test, they returned to each other. Their arguments ended with apologies, their silences ended with smiles, and every distance was closed by the same promise: no matter what, I am here. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And in the heart of New York, two souls who once felt incomplete now carried each other forward, through laughter.
Through tears, through the fragile beauty of love itself. Spring came with promise of new beginning.
The city thawed from its icy silence, and with it, Elara and Kael's love blossomed into something deeper. They spent weekends exploring hidden corners of New York, quiet bookstores, rooftop gardens, and riverside walks where the world seemed to fade. Kael often carried a notebook, scribbling fragments of dreams he hoped to turn into stories one day. Elara teased him, calling him the poet of unspoken words, but secretly, she cherished the way he poured his heart onto paper. She began to imagine a future with him, one filled with warmth and laughter that her childhood home had never given her. But dreams often walk alongside fear. Kael's work began to demand more of his time, and his ambition pulled him into long nights away from Elara. At first, she understood, telling herself it was only temporary. Yet with each unanswered call, each delayed promise to meet, her heart began to ache. One evening, standing by her window, she whispered to the city lights, "Why does love feel so close yet so far?" When Kael finally arrived hours late, Elara's voice trembled with frustration.
"I don't need grand promise, Kael.
I just need you, here." Kael held her hands, guilt heavy in his eyes. "I'm trying, Elara. I want to give us a future worth keeping." Their love became a dance of closeness and distance, laughter and quiet sorrow. They argued, not because they loved less, but because they loved too much. Kael's fire for his work clashed with Elara's longing for presence, and in their silence lay the weight of unspoken fears. Yet every time they reached the edge, they found their way back. Sometimes it was Kael showing up at her door with her favorite flowers, sometimes it was Elara leaving him a handwritten note tucked inside his notebook. Little gestures, fragile and fleeting, held them together when words failed. Still, Elara could not silence the storm inside her. One rainy night, after another long silence stretched between them, she confessed her fear.
What if love isn't enough, Kael?
What if we're just two different worlds trying to hold each other? Kael pulled her close, his voice low but certain. Elara, love isn't about being the same world. It's about choosing every day to walk together, even when it rains. In that moment, though the city outside was soaked in storm, Elara felt the fragile promise of sunlight inside his arms. Summer arrived with the promise of warmth, yet a quiet tension had begun to weave itself between Elara and Kael. Their routines no longer aligned as easily as before, and each day brought small frustrations that seemed heavier than they should. Kael's ambitions demanded long nights, and Elara's heart, craving his presence, often felt deserted. One evening, she waited at their favorite cafe, the light fading as minutes stretched into hours. When Kael finally arrived, breathless and apologetic, her eyes betrayed the quiet storm inside. "I can't keep pretending everything is fine when I feel invisible," she whispered, her voice trembling. Kael's guilt weighed on him like the humid summer air. He reached across the table, taking her hand in both of his. "Elara, I am here now, and I will do better."
You mean everything to me.
Yet even as he spoke, a shadow lingered, a doubt neither could shake. The love between them was no longer only joy and laughter. It carried the weight of longing, the ache of unmet expectations, and the fear that promises alone could not bridge the distance that life demanded. They left the cafe that night hand in hand, but silence hung heavier than words. Weeks passed, and their love endured small storms, arguments over missed meetings, over assumptions and fears. Yet in the quiet moments, they still found solace in each other's presence. A shared coffee in the park, a soft touch on the subway platform, a whispered "I love you" as the city lights danced across their faces, these were the fragile threads that held them together. Every smile, every touch became a vow that even in hardship, their hearts were intertwined. And still, beneath the surface, unspoken questions hovered, threatening to disrupt the harmony they had so carefully nurtured. One night, under the shimmering reflection of the Hudson River, they confronted the truth of their fears. "Kael," Elara said, voice breaking, "I don't know if we can keep carrying this if we keep hurting each other, even when we try so hard." Kael pulled her close, feeling the tremor in her hands. Elara, every trial we face only proves how much we belong together. I will never let you go. Not now, not ever. In that quiet embrace, they held on, hearts beating in unison, a fragile promise shining brighter than any fear. Autumn arrived with golden leaves, but with it came the harsh reminder that life often intrudes on love. Kael received an unexpected job opportunity that required him to travel across the country for weeks. Elara tried to hide her disappointment behind a brave smile, but inside, her heart tightened. I'll write, I'll call every day, Kael promised as he kissed her forehead at the airport, the roar of planes masking their quiet words. Elara nodded, forcing a grin, yet the silence that followed after he left was heavier than the bustling city streets. The first days of distance were bearable. Letters, messages, and video calls filled the gaps, yet every tiny delay in reply carved a subtle ache in Elara's heart. She began to overthink, wondering if Kael's attention was drifting, if the promises they made in Brooklyn Bridge's glow could withstand miles and time zones. Each phone call ended with reassurances, each text with affectionate emojis, but the fear of separation lingered. She found herself wandering past familiar places they had shared, tracing memories that now felt fragile and fleeting. Kael, on his side, struggled with the weight of distance as well. Work demanded his full attention, and despite sending letters and calling whenever he could, he sensed the quiet shift in Elara's voice. One evening, in his hotel room overlooking a foreign skyline, he whispered to the night, I am trying, Elara. Please don't let this space between us grow. He felt helpless, knowing that love alone could not erase the ache that miles imposed. Every promise he had made now demanded more effort, more patience, and a constant presence he could only offer through a fragile screen. Weeks turned into a month, and tension quietly built beneath their tender exchanges. A single misunderstanding over a missed call spiraled into an argument, carried over messages, each word heavier than intended. Elara's frustration met Kael's guilt, and both felt the sting of distance in ways neither had anticipated. Yet in the midst of confusion, their hearts still clung to the unspoken vow, to find each other again, to fight for a love that had begun so beautifully, to believe that even storms could not erase the foundation they had built with laughter, promises, and unwavering hope. Winter returned, colder than ever, and with it came the weight of unspoken doubts. Kael had been away for months, his calls less frequent, his replies delayed. Elara felt the chill not just outside, but deep in her chest, as if the city's lights themselves couldn't warm her heart. She wandered through familiar streets, touching the spots that once held laughter, now echoing with silence. The letters he sent felt like lifelines, yet each one reminded her of the distance growing between them. She asked herself repeatedly, is love enough when life pulls us apart? Kael, too, was consumed with the ache of absence. Every late-night work call, every conference, every flight that took him away from her, he carried it all in his heart. He longed to feel her hand in his, to hear her laugh without a screen between them. One night, alone in a hotel room with snow falling silently outside, he pressed his forehead to the cold window and whispered, Elara, hold on.
You will return, I promise.
He wrote letters, made plans, but the physical void made every promise heavier, every word fragile against the reality of separation. Then came a turning point, a misunderstanding that neither expected. A message misread, a moment taken out of context, and the trust they had built wavered. Elara felt hurt, Kael felt misunderstood, and for the first time, silence stretched between them longer than comfort. Tears fell on both sides, hearts aching with regret, yet neither could fully let go. Even in heartbreak, the memory of Brooklyn Bridge, their first vow, and the small acts of tenderness they shared kept the connection alive. They realized that love was not only passion but endurance, patience, and the courage to forgive. Finally, after weeks of tension, Kael returned. The airport was crowded, the winter wind biting, yet all that mattered was seeing Elara's eyes. Words were unnecessary, their embrace spoke everything. I am here, he whispered against her hair.
He never left, not truly.
Elara clung to him, letting go of fears, letting the warmth of his presence heal the wounds distance had caused. That night, they walked through snow-dusted streets, hands intertwined, knowing that love, tested and true, could survive even the longest winters. Spring finally returned, carrying warmth and the scent of new beginnings. The city felt alive again, but this time, Elara and Kael experienced it together. The trials of distance, misunderstandings, and silent fears had shaped them, but not broken them. They walked hand in hand through the streets of New York, laughter mingling with the hum of the city, each step a testament to the love that had endured everything. Every corner, every cafe, every quiet park bench now held memories they had weathered together. Elara looked at Kael, her eyes reflecting sunlight and a quiet strength she hadn't noticed before. "We made it," she whispered, voice trembling with emotion. Kael smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "We did. Because we never stopped believing in us." In that moment, words were secondary. Their gaze, their closeness, and the simple touch of fingers intertwined spoke more than any promise could. Every past argument, every tear, and every night spent apart seemed like a stepping stone leading them to this certainty. The days that followed were gentle yet profound. They shared dreams and built plans, small and large, knowing that life would always challenge them. They laughed over morning coffee, held each other through quiet evenings, and whispered words of love under starlit skies. The world outside remained unpredictable, but inside the cocoon of their shared life, they had found peace. It was not a love untouched by hardship, but one that had been tempered by trials and strengthened by understanding, patience, and unwavering faith in each other. Finally, one evening on Brooklyn Bridge, the place where their journey had begun, they stopped, looking out over the river, lights shimmering like scattered diamonds. Kael turned to Elara, taking both her hands. "Do you remember the promise we made?" he asked softly. "I kept it," she said, tears glistening. "And I always will." They embraced, hearts beating in harmony, knowing that no matter what the future held, they had discovered the rarest treasure, a love that survived storms, distance, and time, bound forever in smiles, tears, and promises.